the reality is that if you focus on relationship building no matter what, then you're going to be able to cultivate something that makes folks who are just coming into your community of donors feel welcome.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here with another great episode of Relish This. My guest today is Tim Sarrantonio, and he is the head of partnerships and business at NeonOne. NeonOne is this great nonprofit platform that ties together a whole bunch of tech so that you can stay focused on your mission. And that was actually one of the best topics of conversation that we had today, was how if you can just keep the focus on what you do best and what you're trying to bring to your community and to your stakeholders, you're going to win. And it's just a really fun conversation. We talk a lot about data, but I really hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Tim, how are you today?
I am doing well, Stu. Thanks for having me.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. You are with NeonOne, which provides a whole host of really interesting software and website building and all sorts of other tools for nonprofits.
Yeah, it's definitely the most interesting job I've ever had. I'm head of our partnerships and business development, and have been with the company for about 10 years. And when it got its start, it was focused on a constituent relationship management system, basically a way to track donors and activities and emails and letters and all that type of stuff. But it's grown significantly, especially in the past few years, to do peer-to-peer fundraising, giving days for communities, arts and ticketing, even program management, like client case management. Don't use paper. Use
right.
digitize things, that type of stuff. So
yeah, that's great. I think we were introduced because we did some work with Civicor, which was a nonprofit CRM back in the day that you guys picked up, I think, and integrated with, and brought them under your umbrella. So I know that we've had really good luck working with that particular CRM with a couple of nonprofits that we've worked with at Relish Studio. And, it sounds like you guys have just kind of taken that and run with it in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. And actually, technically, Civicor is unfortunately no more.
Okay.
The name, we basically shifted our brand a few months ago. So to simplify the story, that we're creating a unified technology ecosystem. So it's Neon CRM, Neon Client Case Management, Neon Fundraise, Neon Giving Days. Name it what it does, basically.
Yeah, that's great.
It does. Neon Website. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people need that we try to actually have connect. And I think that's the biggest difference between us and other technology companies, is that we're very obsessive about actual integration. So there's one payment processor, there's one support portal that connects to the learning management system for people to get trained on things, and then when you're using the products, they actually all connect. And even if you're using third-party apps, they all connect in a way that makes sense, because it takes a lot of time and effort to figure out how these things connect, and we don't have that time. And we definitely don't have that time anymore, where there's just so much at stake. So we have to do better, and that's what we're trying to do over here.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that then contributes to the other thing that nonprofits tend to have, a challenge with is time and then resources in terms of revenue. So it's great that you guys are kind of tackling both of those pillars at the same time. I think that having a unified ecosystem for one's outreach and being able to coordinate all of that stuff under one roof has got to be a big time saver for nonprofits.
I feel like there's so many organizations that they're just so scared that if they make the wrong decision, they're going to get fired, right? Like, I was in that position, and I did make wrong decisions that got me fired when you get down to it. And so there's not a lot of room for error in the nonprofit and social good sector as a whole. And there's a lot of people who you might even hear things like, my board doesn't like me, as a fundraiser, or, I'm there. I'm worried about how, like, think about even real estate, Stu. How many people shifted to remote work because of the pandemic, but they're still paying for their office?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that cuts into the revenue capabilities. The board's really not going to give a hoot about the fact that there's a budget for shortfall because the fact that, your traditional gala fell through. So what can we do where we can basically make our budgets pandemic emergency proof when you get down to it, right? And I feel like what NeonOne does well is we allow organizations the freedom to innovate because we cover the basics so well.
Right.
And it's like, out of the box, connect to QuickBooks. Like, you don't have to figure it out. But
Right.
but the other piece, though, is that there's too many. It's such a hard thing, Stu, because you got to hit the right note of sophistication and accessibility. And if you put too many bumper rails on things, then you can't actually innovate. Then you might be able to, like, have the freedom to innovate because your basics are covered. And then when you try to do that, you realize that you have to tack on a bunch of third-party stuff that costs extra that you didn't expect.
Yeah, we see that a lot in the WordPress world, which is, that's our CRM, or I'm sorry, CMS of choice. But
we love it too.
There are quite a few areas in which you just get beaten to death with plugins. So it's nice to have something that is flexible and under one roof.
Like, it's fine. Put Yoast in there. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But, like, you go past that and then it starts getting too much.
Yeah, things can get weird when you just start plugging stuff in. And it feels like that's kind of a challenge that a lot of nonprofits have, is that they're trying to kludge together things. And, it's sad to hear that people are still getting some of that blowback from boards and not being allowed to make some mistakes here and there, because ultimately that's how we learn.
Yes. And I think that, the thing though, that we have to remind ourselves is that a lot of the weirdness in the nonprofit tech space is because people don't truly understand who they are as a company. I'm not talking about nonprofits necessarily. I'm talking about the tech space.
Yeah.
And really the good ecosystems and the good companies really understand who they are. And for us, it's because we're a B2B to C company.
Yeah.
If you make it that the donor experience is bad, then it doesn't matter how good your CRM is. You won't have any donors.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very hard, though. It's very hard. And my worry is that if we look at some of the data that has come out from 2020, digital definitely had a big bump. If you look at the Blackbaud Giving report that found that there was a healthy increase in digital giving, and even when we looked at data, digital versus offline gifts, it went up. ACH went up 88% for our clients who were using our CRM. That's a great stat, but where was it starting from? Right. Oh, right. Basically not a lot. And people are still giving offline. They're still doing checks. They're still doing cash. They're still doing a lot of these things. And digital's basically at best 15% of an organization's revenue, unless you're, charity water, right? And not everyone's charity water.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, the stats that I've seen, and you certainly would have your pulse on some additional information here, but the stats that I keep seeing is that baby boomers still make up the vast majority of donors.
Yes.
And if, my dad is firmly in that camp, and he's very not into paying for things online. And so enabling your organization to be able to collect donations from a variety of different sources, really allowing your donors to be able to make those gifts and do that in the way that they're most comfortable is so important. And what I think tends to happen is you get these new ways of doing things, and you either have an incredible lag on that, or you have people just really interested in jumping in the deep end and saying we're going on digital only, and then they really get beaten up over those kinds of decisions. So just facilitating donations in any possible way is pretty key.
What the pandemic should have taught us is that you need to meet donors where they are.
Absolutely.
And where they want to be. You can't dictate the process to them. And the reality is that we're going to start seeing an acceleration of the digitization of the financial technology part of our overall sector and overall market. And it's beyond. I'm talking about everything when it comes to that. I'm not talking about just nonprofits, but I'll tell you though, we're going to stay at 15% until we start to address the higher net worth individuals' requests and needs, right? Because when we looked at data, 88% of the offline gifts were $1,000 or more.
Okay,
that made up the majority of the giving. So these are like you said, older folks who are writing checks, or they're transferring stock. We actually saw some healthy stock gifts. And one of the integrations that we're working on right now, I'm in testing right now, is with a company called Overflow. And what they do, and it's really cool, is that you can go to your website and you can offer a stock process where you don't treat it like it's a credit card. There's a lot of nuances and a lot of legal elements that come into how stock gifts can get transferred. And so they use technology that authenticates a person's brokerage account.
Okay.
And then the nonprofit has their own corresponding brokerage account. And then I sign in my Schwab or my Fidelity or my E-Trade or whatever, and then I can take something like an IRA or 401k and pop it on over. I literally, it shows me all the holdings that I have in stock. I can choose what I want. You hit a few buttons, you sign electronically, the money goes right into the CRM.
That's amazing.
This is one of the most exciting integrations that I've been working on, and it's not because of how user friendly it is, because there's a lot of user friendly platforms that no one uses, right?
Sure.
It's because this opens up the future of giving all donors the opportunities to change how they think about giving. And I think that the pandemic has made even those folks who are higher net worth individuals more comfortable giving online. And NeonOne, after this is done, will be able to offer people credit cards, ACH, mobile giving, giving through stock, giving through cryptocurrency, and I'll figure out check. I'll figure out check. But a lot of it is trying to get those folks who might do a one-time gift to move into a recurring gift.
Yep.
And we actually did a study with the University of Dallas where we found that about 84.8% or something like that of recurring gifts. And we analyzed 6.4 million transaction records too.
Okay.
And we found that, because I even did a webinar before that study was live, and somebody's like, yeah, but what about people who write checks? Like they go to church and they write a check each week.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, that doesn't happen. Not when it comes to actually how people manage their CRM or manage their giving. Like if you're trying to actually track individual donor data, even the churches during the pandemic, they started asking people, please shift online.
Okay.
We don't want to mess with the checks. And so those smaller gifts that are coming in, we found that the typical nonprofit in our client base is doing $63 a month or $756 a year. Okay. That's awesome. That's actually the highest in the industry when we saw it. And I think a lot of it's because you make it easy on the online, but then you have the relationship tracking on the back.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Go Farm Colorado, and one of the trends that they saw in 2020 was the average gift was down, but the number of transactions was up.
Yep.
And I think that's an interesting metric, and I commend them for kind of figuring that out and doing the work to make sure they understood what was going on. But two things there, and one is that all of those new engagements and all those new relationships have the potential to create recurring opportunities in the future, as well as trying to escalate the way that those people go out and champion the organization. And so though certainly we all love when we can get the average donation up or the average transaction value up, the number of transactions is also such an important metric.
You have to project the revenue. I think a lot of organizations, unfortunately, work off of a profit loss statement as their primary indicator of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way to go. You have to actually look at a series of few key performance indicators when it comes to what's going to actually show whether your organization is growing or not. Because if you just look at year over year profit loss, you might then have a falling out with one of your major donors that just completely wipes out what you assumed was you're in the black.
Yeah.
And let's go back to that example that you talked about in terms of like some of those new people, because we, NeonOne does things like Colorado Gives Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we found that acquisition of new donors on Gives Days is a really effective way, because while Adrian Sargent did research a few years ago on how much it costs to bring in $1,
right.
$1.25.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Now, you tell the board that, they freak out. But if you tell them, yes, but I'm going to keep this person and that's going to compound into this because we retain them year over year, that's an important metric. So retention and acquisition are some of the starting points in terms of your key performance indicators. But giving days are great because you're having a larger conversation in the community to ensure that there's more eyeballs on your mission. And then your costs go down because all you're doing is concentrating on riding this wave that's being promoted by Communities First Foundation, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we found that, for instance, on Giving Tuesday, our giving days had a 63% new donor acquisition rate on Giving Tuesday alone. So we had about 9 days running where we can look at hundreds of nonprofits and all the donors that they're bringing in during that. That's not even looking at some of the other products that we have that had a different approach when it comes to acquisition. Like the CRM had, actually more people coming back on Giving Tuesday, for instance. And that's because that system's designed to keep people.
Right.
Here's the problem, though. Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which is the largest analysis of donor data in the world, individual transaction data. It's a project between the AFP Foundation and Giving Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so they analyzed and just released their data like 2 days ago, something like that, yesterday.
Right.
And what they found was that new donor retention has dropped to about 16%.
Wow. That's
terrifying.
Really,
that's bad.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's not good.
So what do you suggest for nonprofits? Like, what is there anything that you have seen that's working to get that number to go the other direction?
It's interesting because there's also there's a lot of discussions around kind of this conceptual framework that people are throwing around, saying like there's donor-centered fundraising and then there's community-centered fundraising.
Right.
And I think it's a little bit of a false, narrative that's being set up that these two things are incompatible, by the way. I think that there's nuances to both sides, but the reality is that if you focus on relationship building no matter what, then you're going to be able to cultivate something that makes folks who are just coming into your community of donors feel welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can ramp up and have data that tells you the types of people that are really building an affinity for you and maybe open to giving those larger amounts. And so I think that personally, I recommend to nonprofits focus on, from your revenue channels, establishing a good recurring donations program.
Right.
A branded one with its own set of communications and stewardship and impact metrics. And then you look at your major donor cultivation program, your things like legacy giving, your ability to accept stock donations or cryptocurrency donations, right? Like kind of those
Right.
things that the more sophisticated donors, donor advice funds, how are you managing that? Don't go chasing after grants that have nothing to do with your mission. Don't that's where we run into problems, is that we start chasing money that we shouldn't. And that's with events, that's with grants, that's with Amazon Smile.
Mm-hmm.
Look at things that are sustainable and invest into those. That and just be nice to people and don't treat them like ATMs. That's the other thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we do an exercise where we really try to look at kind of the 80% or the 20% of the effort that's churning out 80% of the revenue, or the 20% of the effort that's resulting in 80% of the great volunteers, or what is that? What are the top 20? What does the top 80% of your volunteer base look like? And I mean, in terms of, there's probably, if you have 100 volunteers, there's probably 20 of them that are like amazing and recurring and doing all of the great things that you want them, or that you would like for them to do. And then there's the other 80 that are maybe one-offs, or they come every so often. But really trying to get a good understanding of where those buckets are, so that you know where to invest your time and energy and money in building better new relationships. And it's an interesting exercise that I think can be applied to a whole variety of different aspects of the nonprofit world.
It's really funny that you even bring up that specific instance, because I'm planning for April's webinars that we're going to have. I don't know when this is going to get posted, but like by April, folks, our focus is on volunteerism.
Mm-hmm.
And for a few reasons, giving days solicit spring giving days kick off in April, basically.
Yes. Yep.
And so that for us, it kicks off with Arizona Gives April 6th. And what people do there is that you can pledge a number of hours to the nonprofit, and then you need to go work with them and cultivate that. But then what I also did was I said, let's look at the volunteer data and which organizations are actually converting those people into donors.
Yep.
And what are they doing to do that? And so I found an organization that I'd say who they are if I locked in the date for the webinar, but I have a call with them tomorrow.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about it. And they're very jazzed about it, but I just want to have a conversation with them. I don't want a formal presentation.
Right.
I just want to say, what are you doing? How'd you do it?
Yeah.
It's a pandemic. What did you do? So, and it's been interesting to even hear how some of the organizations have adapted their volunteering. We have a client, Ullman Foundation, who they work with teens with cancer, and already a high risk group, obviously, for health issues. And so they had to think creatively to ensure that, and this is ultimately why I understand very deeply the items around what community-centered fundraising talks about around equity and white supremacy and things of that nature. But ultimately, though, I hear so much community being built by organizations that are practicing donor love. This is why I'm like, I still trying to work this through in terms of like, what does this actually mean for the sector? And look, Stu, this is also like a bunch of Twitter junk that the average nonprofit is probably not paying attention to too, right? So that's one thing. But I look at the community that's built when an organization like Ullman Foundation, and when an organization focuses in on their mission. and focuses in on what makes them great to their community,
Mm-hmm.
then all that just withers away because
Yeah.
they have a security in knowing what they do very well. And Ullman knows that what they do well is that they make their patients, their program participants, the kids that are part of the program feel special and feel that they're going to be connected and that it's going to be as okay as it can be. And it's a beautiful thing that like they had parking lot parties and they had like they started doing like some live stream stuff. Like they had to get creative because they couldn't do things before. And I saw that story repeated over and over and over across arts organizations and healthcare organizations and animal rights organizations and churches and all this different types. You still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sorry, my screen went black, so
No problem
I
at
was like, did
all.
my power go out? Okay, we can edit that out.
Yeah, for sure. I'll make a note.
Okay. So anyway, that's yeah, that's what I got there.
Well, what's really interesting, and I have been in touch with and spoken with, and he was on the show a few months ago, Howie from Hope Kids, and they do kind of a similar thing in the kids with cancer space. And I think they ended up holding, they're very events focused. They ended up holding over 400 events in 2020. So, they're averaging one event, more than one event a day. And it was really cool to hear how, partially they didn't have to pivot because they already were experiencing, this need for social distancing and the need for safety in the health, arena. And they just kind of kept their foot on the gas and were able to just keep serving that community based upon that mission. And if there's one thing that came out of the last year of all of us having to do all of the things that we normally did in person, virtually, it was that people were able to expand their reach quite a bit. Where if you had an organization that usually did things in person and held events, I mean, events cost a lot of money, and not holding an event or doing it virtually saves a lot of money. So there were opportunities to kind of make up the difference. And yeah, I think everyone's really excited to get back in person. And certainly I'm looking forward to that myself, but man, just the opportunities that perhaps had been missed for years because, people thought that they had to hold big in-person galas all the time. It's going to be really kind of interesting to see how things unfold as we move forward.
Yeah, and that's another one where I'm torn because I wasn't a big fan of galas per se.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I helped plan several very successful ones for the nonprofits that I worked for, but the return on investment was always hit or miss. And then I see a lot of organizations where that's like their primary way that they make revenue, and that always concerned me because if something
Mm-hmm.
goes wrong there, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, this goes back to some of the things that I've been pondering about community building, and events can be an amazing community building thing if done right.
Absolutely.
And there's all those small moments that you're never going to get through a recurring donation.
Yep.
or making that big ask or getting a grant letter. Like those are moments that are exciting in a fundraiser's job, but there is something to be said about being able to connect with lots of people at one time and share your mission in a collective way. I mean, people still have weddings, and they're ridiculous in many ways, and like cost a lot of money, and then you're done. But like what you're trying to do is celebrate something that is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And the same could be said about those types of events. And we've seen very, very creative approaches for those types of things. Peer-to-peer fundraising, for instance, has just exploded in our ecosystem. And this is the idea of people doing, going to your network of friends and colleagues and other connections and saying, can you give to this cause? Here's my story of why this is important to me. And this has worked for giving days. This has worked for individual organizations. We had Bike for High, which benefits High Lifeline, at the height of the pandemic in April of last year, held a socially distanced race in New Jersey and nailed it. And they had a hybrid approach where they had heavy digital elements. They had a Strava integration that showed how many miles people were doing if they were participating.
Yep.
Gamified it, and then had less riders, and they raised $7.4 million.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was a really cool thing to watch, and they did it very, very well. And they were creative about it, and they had live stream elements, and we're seeing this with other clients too, where's Chalk Foundation is launching Gamers for Good, and they're having like live stream video game tournaments.
Right.
But I've been in those planning meetings with Chalk, and the thing that always strikes me is the organizations that really get it are the ones that if you are a tech person in that meeting from a company like mine, if you are mainly hearing questions about the tech,
yep,
you're not in a good meeting.
Right.
We would be in these meetings with Chalk, and everything would be focused on how can we involve the kids.
Gotcha. So it really came back down to mission.
It's always mission.
Yeah.
It's always mission.
The tech will figure itself out, right?
I want the best organizations are the ones who are so obsessive about the tech or about their mission, like I am obsessive about the tech.
Right.
The tech is the thing I care about. The experience around the tech is the thing I care about. If the nonprofit is so worked up around the tech, we haven't done our job. They should be so excited that they could do all this stuff, and then they can just focus on doing the stuff. That's what I mean by the freedom to innovate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the ability to invest in the things that allow you to focus more of your time and energy on the thing on those items that you're best at is just invaluable. It's like compounding, in fact, because not only do you now have that time back to focus on those things, so whether that's fundraising or delivering your mission or building trails or whatever the thing is that you're passionate about, not only do you get that time back, but you also get the thing done. So it's, that investment is really, really important.
I think a lot of times, especially in the nonprofit tech space, there's kind of this abstraction that we create around nonprofits and what they do. And what I mean by that is they're like, oh, they're going to help kids. And actually, Stu, I'm going to use your example, which is, building trails, right? Because that struck me, because that was like, ooh, that sounds like a fun mission, right? Like that's something that was intriguing to me, and it's because I know that takes work. It takes so much work to make things right, and the problem is that we continue to be served with marketing in the tech space that basically is like everything is a silver bullet.
Right.
This will solve all your problems. And it's like, oh God, no. I got an email from a company in our space that outright said, we're sorry that GoFundMe charity is closing. Sign up for us. Download all your data from that platform. Send all your donors to our platform, and we'll figure out your donor data situation later.
Okay.
First of all, don't do that.
Yeah.
Please. And second of all, I thought that was highly irresponsible to tell people to do that, because where's the guidance there? That's just sign up for my stuff. And And there's no way that helps an organization actually navigate a very scary situation, potentially, where recurring donations are getting shut off, all the communications are getting shut off. Like, it's a very bad thing that's happening with that platform. And the thing that we should be doing is giving people proper guidance on how to maintain their operations, not just sign up for my junk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I try to keep in the back of my head always that if something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And the other idea being around silver bullets and how, if there was a magic wand that one could wave, then everyone would wave that magic wand, and then we'd have some other problem that we'd be trying to solve for. So, it's kind of like the spammy emails that you get that say, we'll get you to the number one place on Google. It's just not, it's something that people need to really, really keep in the back of their minds in terms of, does this sound legit?
Yeah. And there's going to be more of that. That's the thing. It makes me think of what happens, for instance, in the fitness space. Because this isn't like special to the nonprofit sector.
Right.
We didn't invent the term snake oil salesman.
No.
There's going to be, and I actually think a lot of it isn't that organizations like this are bad actors. I think their intentions are good. I think that they just don't understand the industry in a way that implicitly gets to the fears that people have and the things that keep people up at night, and their answer is to be kind of tech bro-y about it, because that's all we keep hearing now is like, well, technology will save us. It's like, nah, that's going to help for sure. I'm obviously a huge proponent of that. Sure. But we got to have a reckoning on how we run our organizations that has nothing to do with tech.
Yeah, and we've said it, you touched on it a couple of times here. I think it's just getting back to that core mission, and is your core mission to engage or create a tech platform, or is your core mission to help people figure out this problem that they're having in their lives? And so just leading with that and really making sure that everything we're doing is aligned with that that fundamental driver, I think is part of the key.
Again, there's just such an identity crisis that we're going through, because there's a lot of wealth that's starting to shift in our space, right? Like you talked about the boomers, right? And there's a lot of kind of reorganization of wealth that we keep hearing about when it comes to where our donors are giving. And then you have kind of younger philanthropists that are coming up, and conceptual ideas like giving circles. Those are starting to come up more, and then there's the growing donor advised fund area of how people give, and then there's the digital side.
Right.
That has that. And the thing that I always try to have when I talk to my fellow technologists in the space, I have to keep saying, like, yeah, digital's great. Bunch of old people are still writing checks. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. One thing that's really encouraging to me is the boomers are still very engaged and are continuing to give. And as people age out or age, they tend to become that donor base. But one thing that's really exciting are all of the trends that you see about some of the newer generations who are very civic minded and very interested in supporting for-profit businesses as well as nonprofits, based upon the good that they're doing in the world. And so what's really interesting, I think, is so I guess, well, there might be another generation in there that I'm not remembering right now, but let's just say as Gen Xers start to age into that giving phase of their lives, their giving is going to expand. But that seems like or at least what you're hearing, is that that's kind of baked in at a very, very early age to some of these younger generations. And so it feels like we're on the cusp of a really interesting time for, for nonprofits to really thrive, as well as for there to be a big shift in the way that for-profit businesses do business.
Yeah, I would agree, and the generational data is interesting, especially when they start looking at Generation Z or
Mm-hmm.
the iPhone I don't know. Look, I'm that weird 1982 born one that it's like I'm the cranky millennial, I guess. I'm not
Okay.
sure if that's an official one, but that's what I'm going to call myself, the cranky millennial. And so, the millennials with mortgages. And
Right.
so basically, I remember doing a TEDx talk in my hometown of Newburgh, New York. And it was at my high school, so that was weird. But I'm backstage waiting to go on, and they paired us up with like, okay, you're going to go in like cohorts of 3.
Okay.
And so I was waiting, and I was with 2 high school students, and like both of them had founded nonprofits.
Yep.
And so yes, that tracked on an anecdotal level, but even yes, the data is showing that a lot of the Generation Z folks are like you said, very civic minded, very socially conscious. This is also becoming more and more important about where people want to work.
Yep.
The thing that I want to caution is that I don't want this stuff to turn into performative, like corporate marketing.
Yes.
And this is what capitalism does. It's going to like take something beautiful and it's going to turn it into like a marketing campaign. I understand that.
Well, I think we already see a lot of that, but
Oh,
yeah.
goodness, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
But you look at a platform like Tiltify
Mm-hmm.
and what they're doing in terms of the influencers that are very civic minded, that are using their platforms, and then something on Twitch for live streaming. If folks don't know Tiltify, it's a platform that empowers creatives to reach their audiences around charitable causes in unique ways. Very cool stuff. Love the company, love the CEO. And what's really cool to watch is like all these younger folks, they're not just playing video games, they're doing a bunch of different stuff. They were spotlighting somebody, I think that gosh, I was trying to remember what she does, but like there's people who are doing cooking and storytelling and knitting demonstrations and like all this different stuff. And they're doing it in a way that like, look, I'm old. I don't quite get it all the time, but I know that they're helping people and that they're passionate about it. So it's like, don't tell donors where you want them to be. Be where donors are.
Right.
And if there's a bunch of younger folks, oh God, I keep sounding so old, Stu. Oh my God. If kids today want to donate on the Twitch, Stu, then they should donate on the Twitch. And so there's your quote of the podcast. Oh God. I have young children, and it's like it's not that I fear for them, it's that I just wonder, like, what is it going to be like for my 3-year-old in
Right.
15 years,
Right.
and how are they going to be interacting? And I hope, and what I do every day and why I get up every day is that a world for them and many, 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 many children like them is a caring, a caring one, a kind one, a safe one that is equitable, one that is just going to be a better world. And I think that technology can do that as long as we keep our eye on the prize. And so that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Well, I think you guys are doing that at NeonOne. I really love all of the integrations that you're creating and all of the systems that you're enabling nonprofits to tap into to make their lives better and easier. And so I think you're on the right track. And I really appreciate you being on the show today. How can people get in touch? Where should they go to find out more information about NeonOne?
NeonOne.com. Pretty
right.
easy. We got lots of reports and guides. We just released a very exciting report on pandemic peer-to-peer fundraising trends.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to put together. We talked about events. We talked about live streaming. We wrote up on giving days and we analyzed millions of dollars of records and hundreds of campaigns and their fundraisers. And we looked at the fundraiser themselves as opposed to the aggregate campaign to look at the behavior of those folks. And so that's that, I just released that report, very excited about that one. But we got a lot going on. And it's because of our growing partner network.
That's fantastic. So everybody can go to NeonOne.com and check that out. I like to end all of my shows with an action. I love talking. I love hearing about new things and talking about the nonprofit space and how we can all do a little more to help out in that world. But at the end of the day, I love for people to take action. If people were listening to the show today, what would you want them to do in terms of taking any sort of action to make people's lives better?
Okay. Well, it depends on segmenting your audience, right? So one, that's a good start. But I would say if I'm talking to somebody who works in a nonprofit space, I want you to step back and I want you to make an audit of all your technology and the processes on how that and just even focus on your donations process. How many different pieces of technology do you have in order to engage with that person throughout the year? Write it down on a piece of paper, make a box around every piece of technology and then try to map it. If you don't work in the nonprofit space and you're like a board member or something like that, or a donor, just an interested listener, I want you to find if your community has a giving day or a giving community platform. So like, for instance, Washington gives year round, Colorado gives year round. Go to that and just use the search filters to find a nonprofit that interests you that you've never donated before and give them a few bucks. And those are my action items.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that you're looking forward to going and having a nice meal. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with me and really fun stuff. Thanks so much, Tim.
Oh, thank you, Stu.
Have a great day.
You too.
All right, there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are two things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. And while you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you'd like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com